The receipt was tucked behind a tattered insurance folder in the glove box, its crisp edges feeling like a razor blade against my fingertips. I didn't scream, I didn't even cry. I just sat there in the sweltering heat of the driveway while the ink on the paper blurred into a series of zeros that felt like a death sentence. Julian had handed me a small plastic-wrapped box the night before for my 30th birthday. And inside were 2 dull silver studs from a department store clearance rack. He had kissed my forehead with a look of practiced pity, telling me that things were tight, that the mortgage was a monster we had to feed, and that real love didn't need shiny trinkets to survive. I had believed him, felt guilty for even wanting more, and wore those $20 earrings to dinner like a badge of my own loyalty. But the paper in my hand told a different story, one where $4,500 had been traded for a diamond necklace at a boutique I wasn't even allowed to walk past without him checking his watch. I stayed in the car until my breathing leveled out, my mind racing through every excuse I could manufacture for him. But the truth was already clawing its way up my throat. I didn't find the jewelry in the house, which meant it was already gone, already hanging around someone else's neck, while I sat here counting pennies for the grocery bill. My hands were shaking when I finally grabbed his phone from the kitchen counter later that evening while he was in the shower. I knew the passcode. A sequence of numbers he thought I never noticed, and within seconds, the ghost of his past was screaming at me from the screen. Her name was Vanessa, the one who supposedly broke his heart years before we met, the one he claimed was a chaotic mistake. The messages weren't chaotic, they were worshipful, filled with his promises to take care of her and his complaints about a wife who had grown demanding and dull. He told her she deserved the best because she was a queen, while I was just someone he had to manage, someone who didn't understand the value of a dollar. The betrayal wasn't just the money or the diamonds, it was the calculated way he had made me feel small for having basic expectations. He had gaslit me into thinking our financial struggle was a shared burden, a mountain we were climbing together when in reality, he was just holding me down so he could lift her up. I watched the steam rise from under the bathroom door, listening to him hum a tune, and I realized that the woman he married was gone. In her place was someone cold, someone who realized that if he wanted to treat me like a footnote in his life, I would make sure I was the one he could never forget. I didn't confront him that night, or the next. Instead, I waited for the one event where our entire social circle would be watching, his sister Chloe's black tie wedding. I knew Vanessa would be there because Chloe still considered her a close friend, a fact that had always been a thorn in my side, but was now a weapon in my hand. I spent the next week in a state of quiet, chilling composure, moving through the house like a ghost while Julian praised me for being so understanding about our budget. He even suggested I wear a dress I already owned to the wedding to save money, and I just smiled, nodding as I tucked the diamond necklace I had quietly retrieved into my purse. I hadn't stolen it from Vanessa. I had found where he was hiding it in his office, safe before he could deliver it, replacing the velvet box with an empty one that weighed exactly the same. He was so confident in my submissiveness that he hadn't even checked the contents before he left for work that morning, assuming I was too preoccupied with my little $20 earrings to ever look deeper. The day of the wedding arrived with a pale, oppressive gray sky that matched the temperature of my blood. I spent 3 hours on my hair and makeup, transforming the tired, neglected wife into a woman who looked like she owned the room Julian was trying to keep me out of. When I finally stepped out of the bedroom, Julian was standing by the door, adjusting his tie, and the moment he saw the diamonds shimmering against my collarbone, the color drained from his face so fast, I thought he might faint. He opened his mouth to speak, his eyes darting from my neck to the hallway leading to his office, but no sound came out. I just adjusted the clasp, letting the stones catch the light, and told him that I had found his little surprise and decided it was too beautiful to wait for a special occasion. I told him he was right, that I deserved the best, and the look of sheer, paralyzing terror in his eyes was the best gift I had received in a decade. The drive to the ceremony was silent, heavy with the weight of everything unsaid, as Julian gripped the steering wheel until his knuckles turned white. He knew that if he accused me of taking it, he would have to explain why he bought it in the first place, and he knew that if he stayed silent, he would have to watch me wear his betrayal like a trophy. We arrived at the venue, a sprawling estate filled with the scent of lilies and expensive perfume, and as we walked toward the gardens, I saw Vanessa. She was standing near the bar, wearing a dress that cost more than my car, looking around expectantly, likely waiting for the man who promised her a diamond necklace to pull her aside. When her eyes landed on me, specifically on the way the sun hit the stones at my throat, The smug smile she was wearing shattered into a million jagged pieces. I walked straight toward her, Julian trailing behind me like a shadow that had lost its light, and I didn't stop until I was inches away from her face. I complimented her on her dress, my voice smooth and honey-thick, and then I leaned in close, whispering just loud enough for Julian to hear that some things are simply too expensive to give away to people who don't own them. The rest of the evening was a blur of forced smiles and panicked whispers, as Julian tried to steer me away from his family, while Vanessa watched us with a fury that threatened to set the tent on fire. Every time someone complimented my necklace, Julian had to stand there and nod, his face twisted in a grimace of agony as he confirmed the price of his own duplicity. He was trapped in a cage of his own making, unable to reclaim the gift, unable to explain the theft, and forced to play the role of the generous husband while his heart rotted in his chest. By the time the cake was cut, the tension had reached a breaking point, and I saw Vanessa pull Julian into the shadows of the veranda, her gestures frantic and her voice rising in a sharp, jagged pitch. I didn't hide. I didn't wait for them to come to me. I simply followed, stepping into the dim light with the poise of a woman who had nothing left to lose. She was screaming at him, calling him a liar, demanding to know why his wife was wearing her necklace, and Julian was stammering, trying to weave a new web of lies that was falling apart before it could even form. I cleared my throat, and they both froze, looking at me as if I were a judge delivering a final verdict. I took off the necklace right there, the diamonds cold and heavy in my palm, and I held it out to him, not with anger, but with a terrifying hollow kind of peace. I told him that he didn't have to choose anymore because I was making the choice for him, and as I dropped the necklace into the dirt at his feet, I felt the last cord of our marriage snap. I looked at Vanessa and told her she could have him. The man who buys cheap earrings for the woman who builds his life, and diamonds for the woman who only wants his money. I walked away from the lights, the music, and the man I thought I knew, leaving them both standing in the dark with a pile of stones that didn't mean a thing. I didn't have a plan, I didn't have a house, and I certainly didn't have any jewelry, but as I drove away from the estate, I realized I had never felt lighter. The $20 earrings were still in my jewelry box at home, a reminder of what I was worth to him, but as I looked in the rearview mirror, I knew I was finally worth something to myself. The silence in my new apartment was the loudest thing I had ever heard, a hollow ringing that echoed off the bare walls, and the single suitcase I had managed to pack before the sun came up. I had left the diamond necklace in the dirt because keeping it would have felt like carrying a piece of his rot with me, and I wanted to be clean, even if being clean meant being broke. My bank account was a desert, a collection of small numbers that Julian had always managed for us, claiming he was protecting me from the stress of bills when he was really just keeping me on a leash. I sat on the floor of that tiny studio, the smell of stale paint and old carpet filling my lungs, and I looked at my hands, realizing they hadn't belonged to me for a decade. Every meal I cooked, every shirt I ironed, and every time I bit my tongue to keep the peace, I had been building a monument to a man who saw me as an item on a balance sheet. The first few weeks were a blur of adrenaline and sheer, paralyzing terror as I navigated a world that didn't care about my broken heart. I found a job at a small florist shop 3 blocks away, a place where the air smelled like damp earth and crushed stems, and for 8 hours a day, I let my fingers go numb while I clipped thorns. Julian called me incessantly at first, his voice transitioning from sobbing apologies to jagged threats, telling me I would never survive without his protection. He told me Vanessa had left him the moment she realized there was no necklace and no more easy money, and he expected me to find some twisted comfort in his misery. But I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel vengeful. I just felt a profound, heavy exhaustion that made my bones ache every time the phone vibrated. I blocked his number on a Tuesday afternoon while standing in the cooler surrounded by lilies, and the moment the screen went black, I felt a physical weight lift off my chest. I started to notice the small things, the way the light hit the pavement in the morning, the taste of a coffee I bought with my own earned money, and the fact that I didn't have to ask permission to turn on the heater. My sister-in-law Chloe was the only one who reached out, sending me a long message about how the wedding had been ruined, but that she finally understood why I did it. She told me that Julian had been spiraling, that the family was starting to see the cracks he had spent years hiding behind his calculated, frugal persona. She offered me money, but I turned it down, not out of pride, but because I needed to know that my life was mine, even if it was a small, quiet life. One evening, about 4 months into my new reality, I was cleaning out my old handbag and found those $20 earrings tucked into a side pocket, still on their cardboard backing. I looked at them for a long time, the cheap plating already starting to tarnish, and I realized they were the most honest thing Julian had ever given me. They were a reflection of how he saw me, a placeholder, something low maintenance that he didn't have to value because he assumed I would always be there. I walked down to the pier that night, the wind whipping my hair across my face, and I didn't throw them into the water with a dramatic gesture. I just left them on a park bench for someone else to find, someone who might see them as a treasure, because to me, they were just junk from a life I didn't live anymore. I am 30 now, and my life doesn't look like the one I imagined when I was 25. But when I look in the mirror, I recognize the woman staring back at me for the first time. I don't have diamonds, and I still have to check my bank app before I buy a new pair of shoes, but my heart doesn't skip a beat when I hear a key in the lock. I learned that the most expensive thing you can ever give someone is your silence, and I am done being quiet for people who only want to hear their own voice. Julian is still in that big house with the mortgage he used as a cage, and sometimes I wonder if he still looks for that necklace in the dirt of the garden. But then I remember that it doesn't matter, because I am the one who walked away, and no amount of diamonds can buy back the time I spent believing I wasn't enough.